Welcome to week 3 of Mpai 600 here at Georgetown University Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies Applied Intelligence. Announcements: Paper 1 is due right now, yesterday, depending on when you are watching this. So if there's issues, let me know. But I think you should all have it wrapped up as you're watching this. So. I want to review last week, and again, we have to have this compressed schedule because of the 7.5 week course. So I want to hit the high points of this past week. So we talked about requirements. Hopefully, they were integrated into your collection plan, and I talked about those in depth. The next part was intelligence traps or analytical traps that people who are in intelligence community, doctors, law enforcement. Those where you have to make decisions based on not complete information. People will use these analytic biases or shortcuts so they can make a decision based on incomplete information. The key issue is, again, confirmation bias. When you settle on a theory and every new piece of information you get is used to confirm that theory. Mirror imaging, where we assume an adversary is going to act in the same way that we are, that they don't have their own issues and bureaucratic processes and cultural impacts. And these were highlighted in the confessions. I hope when you watch this, you were as mad as I was. And before I talk about this, I just want to say is that documentary ended in 2019 or 2009. Restitution for these individuals didn't come about until 2019, like right before the pandemic hit. Before they finally got their final lawsuits were settled with the city of Norfolk. Again, at the end of the documentary, they were released, but only in 2013 were they taken off the sex offensive list, and only in 2019 were all the lawsuits settled. So again, this is classic confirmation bias. They settled on one theory of the case, that it was done by Navy personnel, and they went through ridiculous mental contortions to confirm that original assertion. And I think this takes it to an extreme, but it illustrates what confirmation bias is. There's vividness bias. Detective Ford knew that if he was going to get convictions, a confession was the best way to do it. He knew that. He knew getting on tape would play well to the jury, and you saw it. We could talk about DNA, we could talk about motivation, we could talk about all sorts of things, but that tape and hearing someone confess to, I broke into her house, I put her on the floor, I pinned her down, I sexually assaulted her, then I pulled out a knife, and then I stabbed her. That is a vividness bias that is going to resonate with a jury. And you can talk all day long about false confessions and people making confessions under duress. That will supplant it. Negative evidence. Everyone focused on the confessions and these Navy soldiers that were supposedly involved in this. What they didn't do was flip the script and say, okay, so we have these people that say, why are we not seeing DNA evidence? Why are we not seeing motivation? Why are we not seeing these other things that you would normally associate with a gruesome murder that you saw there? No, everyone was focused on the convention or the confessions. Everyone was focused on getting these guys arrested. They weren't asking the opposite question. Why aren't we seeing other things? There was clientelism. Detective Ford worked for the prosecutors who worked for the county. They don't want to see a murderer go out free. They want to solve this crime. They want to make people feel safe. So there's pressure to get a confession, to get convictions, to get arrests, because you're pushing, because you want to impress your client, whether it's the prosecutors, whether it's the city at large. So there was clientelism that put pressure to arrest these folks, and that's another reason why you had the bad confession. And before you guys pin this on Detective Ford, let me just say that there was detectives, other police, juries, appellate courts, judges, appellate judges, all were victim to these biases that I mentioned here. And a couple of things I just want to leave you out with is the Georgetown Values. In this case, as I mentioned, justice didn't arrive until 2019, until 22 years after the first arrests were made. Georgetown, they try and have an element of justice, element of you're training to be in this field, and we want to impose some sort of understanding of justice, that you're in a position of power, and that you wield justice better than at least you saw in this case study. Again, I don't know how many people are Catholic or Jesuit or really care or went to Georgetown because of these issues. I doubt that had an impact on a lot of people, but in the school here, we try and impart these. And you saw, again, a gross miscarriage of justice in this case. And then I want to leave you with this final question. A student brought this up a couple of years ago, and it resonated with me. Good people suffer biases. We all have biases. We all will fall into these traps that I just mentioned. Good people do that all the time. And we'll look at that in Iraq WMD and other case studies. But this was not a case of that. This was not a biased person, but an evil person with evil intentions, specifically Detective Ford in this case. And that's why this happened. It wasn't just he had biases or he made these analytical shortcuts, but he had evil intentions to get these guys arrested, put them in jail, and he didn't care that he'd essentially ruined their lives. That's an interesting argument, and it's one I struggle with. I don't agree with it necessarily for a couple of reasons. One, it wasn't just Detective Ford. It was, as I mentioned, judges, prosecutors, appellate judges, etc. So they all had these biases, and I don't think you could say all of them were evil. So that's number one. And number two, I hate to say this, and this may be a result of my pernicious view on human nature, but I think that we could all be Detective Fords given the right circumstances. I think under the right pressures, the right conditions, I think human beings can do horrible things to their fellow man, and you can't just say they're just evil or they're just psychotic or mentally ill. I think there's something in human nature that can inflict massive suffering on others, given the right circumstances. I think we could all be in that scenario. I don't know if that is. I don't know. You don't have to agree with me on that. That is just my opinion. But again, something to just think about going forward. Okay, so week 3 preview, 2 case studies of strategic surprise. This is where we kind of go into the history portion of this course. Pearl Harbor and the Yom Kippur War. So, when you're reading, ask where were the failures? Where in the chain were the failures in the collection cycle or in the intelligence cycle? Was it in collection, analysis, the political interface, or policymakers just not, getting good intelligence and getting good information, but just not acting on it? So think about that as you're going through this week's readings. And maybe there's underlying circumstances. This is stuff happens. Sometimes things happen beyond control that humans can't control. I'll let you decide on that. And then you have the readings. You have the Dahl, the Yom Kippur War, the Bruce Riddell article on Yom Kippur, and then the documentary Al Jazeera, The Crossing. The actual documentary is 3 hours long. The part I've assigned is an hour, but really the first 30 minutes of that hour talks about the intelligence failure itself. So focus on those first 30 minutes. And that's your readings documentary this week. What I do want to say, I want to leave you with this, and in your acknowledgement, please answer if you're interested. On 15 November, I'm going to do with my in-person class, and anyone is welcome to join, a terrain walk on Capitol Hill. Well, if you're in the DC area, we'll meet up right in front of Capitol Hill, and then we'll walk around exactly how the rioters walked around on 6th January. Obviously, we're not going to go inside the Capitol. We're obviously not going to jump into the Speaker of the House's office, but we're going to walk on the outside, ask if, where were the intelligence failures, where were the failures in force protection, and go into detail on there. So you are more than welcome to join if you're interested. Let me know in the acknowledgments of this video. And I look forward to your discussions this week. And if there's questions or issues, don't hesitate to contact me.